is out of town, so she'll be participating via teleconference today. I want to welcome everyone to the meeting, and let's stand for a moment of silence and pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We can review the agenda. No, this is a special meeting, so have a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Ms. Richardson. A second,
A second.
Ms. Thompson. Any public comments?
Do we need to vote on it? No.
Yeah.
No. No. What'd you mention? What did you say?
Do we vote on the motion of the agenda?
Oh, I guess we do, don't we? Yeah, first mistake, didn't take long, did it? All in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Passes. Didn't hear Ashley. Could Ashley participate in the vote as well?
She can because we've noted that her.
Can you hear me now, Bill?
There we go, yes. Did you vote for the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, 5-0. Okay, no public comments?
No.
Okay. So item 3, student learning and instructional services, update on assessment, curriculum, and instruction. Julie Bonnefield, Greg Holland, and Mr. Christie.
Hello.
Hello.
Are we comfortable if I take this down just a little
Yes.
bit? That's so hard to, I hate to do that, I want to make you uncomfortable. Okay, so what we wanted to do was we want to take a moment and just kind of talk about what this year has looked like academically for us. It's been a little bit of a challenge, as you may kind of think about, with this being a pandemic. So when we kind of got together towards the end of last year with realizing that this is going to be something that we think is more sustainable than just simply until May and whatnot. Our team, our instructional team, kind of came together. And we said we need to form a game plan as to what we're going to do here. This is going to be something that we hope we're wrong on, but we think this is going to be something that lasts at least until December and possibly longer than that. So let's put together something, a plan in place, to where that we're looking at what student needs are and what principal needs are and what teacher needs are, and trying to put together something that would help us grow as a district, but also be able to be sustainable and grow through a pandemic. And so what we did was we came together as a team, our instructional team, Mr. Christie as well, and we decided, let's meet with principals. And so in the summertime, we called a meeting with each individual principal and had very specific questions for them. What do you need from us to make you a top 10 school? And what do we need in this district? What do we need to do to be a top 10 district in the state? We had a couple of other questions, but those were the two most poignant questions that came from that meeting. And we all three, asked us all three that were in there, and Mr. Christie as well, let's take notes and let's see what we hear from this. And those notes have been a good chunk of the basis for what we have done to move forward. We had our ideas of what to do with the pandemic, how to move some things forward to progress, but we wanted to send a message and show them that no matter whether it's a pandemic or not, we will listen to you. And we want to be able to reference these notes through the course of the year. Several things came out of that. And one of the things that came out was they wanted to have sustainable professional development. And we thought, okay, that may be doable here. We've got a pandemic. if we are out with students and we're gonna be doing this virtually, whether it be a month, whether it be 3 or 4 months, we're gonna have some time to be able to have some professional learning. Now, professional development, because you can't do professional development during the course of the workday, per se, but professional learning. How can we take some things and really build on it that's sustainable? So that's kind of where the Wednesday impetus came from, of where we were kind of working with that to say, okay, if we take Wednesdays and we protect that for professional learning opportunities, where that we have ourselves, we go in. We have outside consultants who come in, who meet with them. These can be done on Wednesdays, so that if we do, we already started having that conversation, if we come back in a hybrid mode, we most likely would be looking at potentially, at least potentially, that AB type of model. So we took some of those conversations, and what we did was we formed a 3-year plan. This is what we want to accomplish over 3 years. Whether it be pandemic or not, it's important for us to form a plan, we'll tweak it as we need to. Let's try to stay the course whether it's pandemic or not. So one of the things we did was we had an opportunity, and you all have heard about this. We said something that is a common theme that we're hearing is the need for right STEM, to advance kids with STEM. So we started working with that creation of the STEM bus, which unfortunately COVID has hit some of those outside partners. Now, we were hoping to get it finished by mid-March, but it's looking like it's going to be the 2nd to 3rd week in May, because those people who do the wraps on the bus and that sort of thing, they've been hit, and that's just impacted us. So when we get that, we'll be happy to show that to you. But we sat there and we said, okay, what is something that's an initiative that's coming up down the pike that we need to be ahead of? And one thing that's coming, and this is kind of how the whole thing started in my mind and with our team and that sort of thing, was social studies, which oftentimes they feel like that they're left behind, because it's not the same type of thing. We put the emphasis so much on math and reading and so forth. But social studies, how that they're going to be evaluated, and how that they're going to be assessed, and how is the best way to teach that, and that is through inquiry-based learning. So we started really studying that inquiry-based, and I'm a fan of deeper learning, something that for the past few years I've really tried to delve into, and I'm kind of passionate with that. One of the components of deeper learning is inquiry-based learning. So we started doing some work, and we realized we're fortunate. We're not in Iowa, we're not in California, we're not in Seattle. We're next to Lexington, Kentucky, which houses the University of Kentucky. And at the University of Kentucky is the preeminent world expert on inquiry-based learning. As a matter of fact, she has written several books. She's formulated designs. It's called the Inquiry Design Model. And she travels all over the country, and I think internationally as well, working with them on her idea model, that Inquiry Design Model. So we called her up, and we said, hey, this is what we're looking to do. We want to bring you in, and we want to have something, going back to the professional development, something that is sustainable, something that's not 3 days, not 1 day, not 2 days, not 3 days, something that's sustainable through the course of the year, to where that we could work with a group of teachers and really teach them this concept of inquiry-based learning. And so we went from just the social studies teachers at the secondary level to we started involving science teachers, language arts teachers, and it began to grow. And so something that I believe pretty passionately about when we talk together as a team, and we believe this is something that's important, is you have to have a foundation for reading to be good at anything. We're pretty good at reading, pretty good at it, but can we become great at it? And that was kind of where we really wanted to take that. So we had a couple schools that had worked with Dr. Christy Wright. And so we contacted her and said, okay, this is what we're doing at the secondary level. We're doing the inquiry-based learning, this inquiry design model. And we know that the work that you do with the reading, it kind of dovetails in with that because the inquiry-based approach is there as well. So we took from an elementary basis with that reading. And we started kind of with a grassroots type of approach. And we didn't mandate anything, we just started with that. This is what we believe in, this is the direction that we're going with. And we started to see some schools that got on board with that. And right now, we have preschool, all 4 elementaries, and Baker. They have had purchased for them all of the materials. They've had the training. Dr. Wright, we've been able to bring her in, and she stayed 2 days, 3 days a week at a time, actually going in, working with the teachers. This has caused us to take the next step. What's another step that we need? We really need, in the district, we started talking to the teachers. What's something that would help you guys take this to the next level? Because they were buying into it, and they wanted to get good at it. And the administrators did as well, and that was something that we tried to make a conscious effort of as well. I'm bringing the administrators in. And so we started doing these cultural themed administrators meetings, to where we started trying to train the principals, really inform them on what's going on in the district, and letting them be a part of that really before we introduced and rolled it out to the teachers. So they felt, because we felt like you can't go in and evaluate something if you yourself don't know what it is that you're looking for. So that was one of the things that they were saying, train us, help us to be good at what it is that we're looking for. So when we go in, we were credible. And that was something that they said, all of them, when we got them together. So we did that, and we brought them in. And through the course of that time, we worked with the principals and the teachers to be able to get them to where that they know what they're looking for when they go into the classroom. Now, back that up, what's that look like for the pandemic? That's what's been fun to watch, is they'll actually break into those Zoom, your Google Meets, and they'll actually be able to observe, ask questions, and so forth. Same thing with the Dr. Swan side for the high school. So Baker kind of sitting in the best of both worlds, if you will. And I told Mr. Mounts, I said, listen, you're sitting here at this middle bridge. We've got preschool through 6 that's doing the work with Christy Wright, Dr. Christy Wright. And then with Dr. Swan, we've got 5th grade all the way up to 12th grade that's doing some of the work with Dr. Swan. Christy Wright with the elementary, Dr. Swan with the secondary. And so they've been able to really get in and really surround their teachers with this concept. But one thing that came out of it was we really need to have some pacing guides. This was something that the teachers were asking for. This was a year 2 project. And so when we first kind of were hearing that this was coming from the teachers and the principals, we thought, just be honest with you, that's a big undertaking. It's a pandemic. We've got a lot going on. We want to be able to do it. If we do it, we want to be able to roll it out systematically, slowly, to where we involve them in the process. We don't want it to be top down, to where it doesn't work. If you try to mandate something like that, then they want to push back. So we wanted them to know, this is because you're asking for this. If you feel like you're ready for it, and they kept saying over and over, we're ready for this, because this helps us to know exactly where we need to go with our instruction during this time, because we're teaching differently than we ever have before. So we had those pacing guides. So we developed skeletal pacing guides. Then the skeletal pacing guides, we started hearing from the teachers, hey, do you have those ready? Do you have first grade ready? Do you have 5th grade ready? Okay, so we started to develop those a little bit more. Currently, right now, we have pacing guides that are very fleshed out, and that some of the teachers are using, most of the teachers actually are using K through 5. We're still finishing up the 6th grade pacing guides, but that's actually informing a lot of their instruction and decisions. And we get a lot of comments back about how that's made teaching fun for them, because we wanted to be very conscious that with pacing guides, as a teacher, if you've ever been in the classroom or if you've ever thought about that, you want to be able to have the autonomy. While there's a structure, you want to be able to have the autonomy to be able to teach how you want to teach, at least to a degree. You don't want to feel like someone just handed you a pacing guide and said, this is the book that you're going to read. It's going to be weeks 1 and 2. You can't go to that next Monday. You've got to end it on Friday. I've been a part of that. That falls flat. It just does. It's miserable as a teacher when that happens. So we wanted to provide that skeletal framework to where, with that curriculum framework, to where that they had that flexibility, autonomy to be able to choose their materials. And what we then put back in is we put in the inquiry-based information to where now that curriculum piece, that pacing guide, has all of those elements, and that's currently what they're using. One thing that we wanted to do was we wanted to say, okay, let's work with technology. What is some way that we have the Google Meets? What's something that we can do to kind of flesh this out and make this better? How can we enhance this particular element? And this is where, and I'm going to butcher the name, but I always refer to it as the Google Enterprise Suite, but it's called MPLUS. It's something very similar to that. But what that did was that enhanced our services with Google so that people could actually have breakout rooms. They could actually pull them out and they could actually have breakout sessions and so forth, where we didn't before. So we all work together to try to do that as an enhancement piece as well. Where we currently stand right now is we've been able to collect data, even through the source of a pandemic, the best that we can. And that's kind of leading us to where we are today. And where we're at today is looking to expand our tutoring so that the tutoring element is something that we really hone in on those kids that possibly, probably, both, could be summer school kids. Let's make use of the time that we have with them in the evening times after school and so forth with tutoring. So our tutoring is really ramping up, and that's going to be something that is going to happen for the rest of the year, 2 to 3 times a week at each building. That's the expectation for each building is to do that. That's going to lead, for some students, that will catch them back up to where they need to be. But for other students, it won't. And so that's where we've been with the development of summer school. And that's currently what we're doing now. So June 7th through June 28th, those are going to be our dates for summer school. It's going to be 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, okay? And so that's going to be at every building. This will be something that will be shared out to the community on Wednesday. We've had bits of information that's rolled out. We want to make sure that this gets its due process. So rather than some testing information went out today. So rather than putting 2 pieces out and one of them getting glossed over or missed, we're going to pause and we're going to put that out on Wednesday for the community to see. Not every building has done tutoring. In the past, we've had tutoring done where I believe the elementaries has fed into one school, I believe Shear, and they have done sort of a summer school, excuse me, not tutoring, but they've done a summer school where it'll last for a period of time and we kind of funnel everyone together. We know this is a situation where we really need to take the needs of the students, examine those, and really try to catch kids up the best that we possibly can. So beginning today and going until the last day in April, we're doing MAP testing, which MAP testing, those MAP scores, the MAP scores that we got at Christmas time, the MAP scores that we had pre-pandemic, that comparison as to where students are, plus how students have performed in the classroom and so forth. That'll be what helps to guide and base our decision-making with summer school. And of course, that's going to lead us through the summer. That'll take us through June. July, I think, is probably a wise move to let everybody have time. Let people have time with their families and so forth. And then we'll start school back at the time that's slated on that Wednesday. I believe it's the 17th, is it? So with the 17th, that still gives us a week or so in August to front load some things, to bring some people in for transition camps. Your 4th grade to 5th grade, your Baker transition camps, your 6th grade to 7th grade, your RDC transitional camps, your 8th grade to 9th grade for GRC, your preschool to kindergarten and so forth. Gives us time to be able to really get to know our students and get to know where they're at. Now, a couple of cool things that we're bringing on, and I've done a lot of talking, so I'll bring a couple of other people to talk about a couple of things too. A couple of cool things that's going to happen for next year that we're going to get the ability to pilot for the rest of this year. We talked about MAP, and what MAP does is MAP is adaptive in how it tests. So if a child gets an answer correct, it progresses them and takes them to a higher level and so forth. So it looks at it through the course of the lens of an entire spectrum. But we were looking and trying to find something that hits us in real time with those standards. So we're working with our pacing guides, and we we're working with the company that's, as a matter of fact, we just finalized the purchase order today. It's called Case 21. And what Case 21 does, if you take your pacing guides, you can do it a couple of different ways. But one way that we're going to do it is, we're going to take those pacing guides, and when we give those to the teachers, they know these are the numbers of standards. These are the standards that are supposed to be taught in this range. And then we're going to assess the students over those standards. So instead of MAP being adaptable and it goes in kind of a wide range, this will hit us and we can front load it with those standards, those types of assessments that we've created to say this is where that you should be, and it gives the teachers, the principals, everybody that real-time data. We covered these standards, the students did not master these, so we need to formulate our remediation with in this particular manner. So,
we know on math, this is something we've talked about for years, math, when you're doing the math testing, it goes beyond where the kids have been, and to expect that they have mastered those standards when they've never been taught them, it's almost an unfair. This Case 21 is designed to test in the standards based on the pacing guides. The pacing guides are across, but just across the board, but they're across their schools. Everybody, so if we have these transitional kids that move from school to school, you've got the pacing guides at all the schools that keeps these kids together at the same place. So it's the same across the district that way. As kids move about, and they move about in the district weekly.
So, and just to kind of piggyback on what they said about MAP, MAP is used as our universal screener, so it's also to identify our students that need intervention, but also our students who are gifted, talented as well. So we can use that data for multiple different things. We purchased CASE. CASE is our benchmark assessments, and this is just truly going to be given 3 times a year. That is a kind of a blueprint for K-Prep. It has a 95% reliability on this. And basically what I like about it is, and what our team likes about it, is that it is giving us information on if what we're teaching is accurate, right? And if our lessons are aligning to the standards. It's also consistent across the district. So that means every 3rd grader during a certain window will receive a benchmark assessment. It's also real-time data. So within a 72-hour time frame, we will get data back. So the teachers will be able to see that information. The students will be able to see that information. Administrators, districts, we can make decisions based on those reports, those assessments. For us. I think, you know, it's so real time that teachers can then turn around and reteach kids. And that's what, you know, that's what we want. We want to know what they know and what they don't know. And so that's what that does. And it basically just answers one question, you know, did the students master the content that was taught? And so that's why it is based on those pacing guides. That's why it was really important as we're developing these, that it is based on our pacing guides set by Clark County Public Schools. So then we can use that. It also will give us a predictive score. So looking at K-Prep, we should be able to see if our students are performing and we're teaching the standards, you know, and our lessons are aligned appropriately, then it gives us a good prediction on how our students would perform on state testing. And so that's something that we can look at as well. Just to kind of carry on with that, I want to give you kind of an update for what our assessment will look like for this year, because it is a little different. I think in your packet, I'm not sure, I think Ms. Arlene gave you this. If you want to look at it, it is the tentative state testing plan. And this is just, it is a kind of a cheat sheet from KASC that I liked how they put out, because it's basically all of the questions that we ask. No change from last year's plan, but a field test for social studies is to be added. In Clark County, we are going to be doing a social studies field test, and that is for 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. So you can see right now, our English proficiency exam, our access testing is going on right now. So hopefully by the 16th, that should be finished for all grades. ACT was administered for our juniors. We had a great turnout for that at GRC. And then you can see reading, math, science, and on-demand, really that hasn't changed in the past. The next one is just looking at testing times and the number of items. So in the past, reading was taken as 2 tests. So there was a part A and part B, and it lasted 135 to 175 minutes. And they've cut that down this year to where our students for reading will have one 60-minute session. It's fewer questions for multiple choice and short answer. And the extended response has been removed, except 5th grade, where there's one extended response and no short answer. So it's just kind of a snippet of what they've learned. For math, the same thing. So it used to be 2 mathematics sections taken and ranged from 120 to 125 minutes, and then 4th and 10th grade, or 4th and 10th grade, and then 3rd grade was 105 to 110. So again, that's been changed to 60 minutes, and that's only part A and part B. Science, for our 4th grade, 7th and 11th graders, again, it's a 60-minute session, approximately half the number of items for that. And then on demand, they have one 90-minute session, and it's a passage-based prompt. So they have taken away, they used to have 2. They only will have 1 this year. So if you look, again, on the second page is our social studies field test, and that is a 60-minute field test that will be taken during our testing window for those grades 5, 8, and 11. And then you can kind of see what the blueprint is for each grade, how many passages, multiple choice, short answer questions for that. On page 3, it's what changes in the testing administration should be expected. Schools will have to make specific plans for testing should students for learning virtual. There's actually going to be a letter going out tomorrow for our distance learning families to invite them to come in. They cannot take K-Prep virtually. So we will be working with families on getting them in to take K-Prep, whatever is best for them. So each school will be sending out their plans for that. Again, it occurs within the last 14 instructional days. So our testing window begins on May 11th and will end on May 28th. There are 2 surveys that will be given this year to our students. The Quality of School Climate and Safety survey will be given, and then there's also kind of an opportunity and access, which they will ask questions about distance learning, our virtual platform, things like that. And that's just to give us, as well as the state, kind of a picture on how we have ran that in Clark County. Any questions? Yeah.
The 3-year plan, could we get a copy of that?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, we've got it.
Yeah, that would be, I mean,
Okay.
I love to read about stuff like that.
Yeah.
And who's the vendor for Case 21? Because I'm not familiar with that.
So it is, Certica is the actual I think it's Learning Partners is the vendor.
Infrastructure is who.
He just had us change that, which is what they need to reach, what his plan is.
I actually printed this out, so I'll give it to you. I think it's Certica.
Runs through infrastructure, which is a vendor.
And that just gives you some, and I can make copies for that as well, so.
And did teachers review this?
Teachers will not review the test, no.
No, I mean, have they reviewed the product?
Not for this, no.
Okay.
No, this is a benchmark assessment that's going to basically give us a picture on how, just teaching and learning. So evaluating what programs we have in place, what we don't have in place, what we need to do, how our kids are performing on those assessments. But they do have the pacing guide as well as the resources.
Okay, so
Well-
this is it's a test maker.
Yes, this is. Mhm. You can
Which is
mark
what
that.
the teachers have constantly asked us for. That's why when we told them we would go and look to see, because they've requested common assessments that align with standards. So in the research part of it, we found Case 21 to be the most aligned to K-Prep and meeting also what the teachers were asking us for, so.
So Case 21 is providing, I think you said 72 hours of almost real time.
It is.
Today, what kind of feedback is the teachers getting? What kind of delay?
So that's only if we decide to do it paper. If we decide to do it digitally, it's instant feedback.
Oh, okay.
So if we do the paper, kind of like the old K-Prep, so we had the choice of which way we decided to administer it. So if we did the paper, it would be 72 hours. If we did the digital, it would be instant.
Previously, without this, what kind of feedback would they get?
It's instant.
With MAP, they get instant feedback as well. It's just with that's the test that measures your entire year type of basis. With this is going to measure that realm right in through there to say, this is what was taught from September 1st to September 30th or whatnot. These are the standards that would have been covered, and this is how that they did. This is where the students are mastering it. So that's what that helps to run with. And we thought, if there's gonna be a year for us to be able to have as much data as we possibly can have, this is the year to do it. Because we've had them, goodness, this is why I don't think, there may be a lot of things that robotics and engineering and that sort of thing takes the place of. It's not gonna take the place of what a classroom teacher does. Nothing can take that place. So while we try to put into place everything that we possibly can, we know there is no substituting what a great classroom teacher does for students. So in order to do that too, we wanted to give the schools, the principals, but most importantly, the teachers who work with those kids, the most information as to where their kids are at. Because for some of them, they're going to have worked with them from March until May, and then they're going to say goodbye to them, and you go into a totally different stratosphere, if you will. And for some of them, they'll even be exiting and leaving buildings. So we thought, if there's going to be a year where we bring in some of the tests, and I want to be clear too, I'm one of these people who have preached, and I've said this publicly 1,000 times. I think sometimes we test too much, and I think that that's where we have put some of our focus is so much into the testing, but what are we doing with the data, and that sort of thing. This is a year where we take a step backwards and we really say we need to test our kids, just we need to see exactly where those learning gaps are, those curricular gaps, and how can we reach those kids and take them to the next level. In doing some research with it with our principals, our team, and kind of vetting some of the things here, we felt like this would give us that opportunity to be able to do that.
So are you gonna do it before school's out?
We're
Or is this
working-
for next year?
This is for next year.
Next year.
So this one next year. Now, remember Tamia, where is she? She just stepped down. Tammy's we're gonna talk about, well, one of the things that came out of our conversations with principals as well was that they wanted to have, when it came to our response to intervention, or also called the RTI process, they wanted to have something streamlined across the district to where that if you go from Strode to Justice, and it goes back to the point that was just made, I think Mr. Christie made it, you'll have students, we're a very transient population, haven't been to DPP, I get to see how much that students move back and forth, and you'd be surprised. You get to certain holidays, you get to certain points in time of the year, and you know you're gonna have an influx of moving and so forth. But with that, if you don't have certain things in place, a student could leave, say, Strode Elementary, and I'm just using them as an example, and they could go to Justice Elementary, and I'm just using them as an example, and they could have two different thoughts on what is RTI 1 and RTI 2, and what are some interventions that we're doing over here, and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we had talked about with the principals, and they'd asked for is, can we have some consistency with that? And so we started researching some companies, and this one was one that this one took a little bit of time, because we wanted to make sure, just when we thought we heard a couple of things that we really, really liked about it, we might move in that direction. We heard a couple things, so we wanted to back up and really vet this particular product. And we've worked, we have talked with teachers, they have seen the scope of this. Certain groups, we've shown this to principals. And one thing is, and we even said this, if it's CASE or if it's Branching Minds, we've been fortunate in the year of having a pandemic that we've had Wednesdays to roll these professional learning opportunities out. We're not gonna have that next year. But regardless, we're gonna make sure we roll this out slow and well, so that you guys don't feel overwhelmed with it. So we're gonna take our time with it to make sure that you feel comfortable with it and it's done well. So with Branching Minds, this is the company that is our MTSS and RTI process. This is something that we are going to move towards, and this is a big commitment that we're making with it. One thing that they will do is, it's nice, we will be able to have sort of a sandbox. They actually gave us, for the rest of this year, in our quote, we have the rest of this year to be able to really get familiar with it. So once we get up and rolling, we're going to be able to familiarize people slowly through the course of the year with the people that we've identified as the team of people for year one to actually do that. And Tammy's actually going to come up and talk about this. This is Tammy Parrish. She's our instructional specialist for the district, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about Branching Minds.
First of all, thank you. And I'm the newbie here. I'm pretty fresh out of the classroom. So I was really excited that Branching Minds was brought on board because as a classroom teacher, especially coming out of the pandemic, we're really gonna know what to do to address those learning gaps for all our kids. So Branching Minds is a cloud-based research program application that syncs with Infinite Campus every night. So whatever the teachers put into Infinite Campus, Map, Case, Mastery Connect, the Fontes and Pinell Classroom, it will all sync, the data will sync nightly. The program then takes that data and it devises specific plans. So as a teacher, we're expected to do RTI, response to intervention, for speech, which is entertaining because we've never received any pre-service training in speech, reading, writing, math. We're working on the science and social studies part, but those are kind of the focuses right now that we're doing with Branching Minds. And it will, once you put the data in, it will take that data and it will devise specific plans. So if a teacher's working with tier 3 kids, it'll be individualized to that student. If the teacher's doing an RTI group with a group of children, it'll do the tier 2 intervention for them. This is probably the best part that I think coming straight from the classroom is I don't have to look for the interventions. The company will take what we already have or the progress monitoring tool that they're kind of lending us this year. It's called Ames Web Plus. We can use that progress monitoring tool and it'll track the kids. It'll send home letters to the parents once we have our PLCs or the RTI meetings. It'll track the kids and like Mr. Holm was saying, it'll go from Justice to Stroh Station to Baker once those 4th graders move up. So there's no loss in communication across for kids moving through tiers. The part that I was going to say I like the best is the professional development. So once it tells the teacher, it gives the diagnosis of what the student needs for their goal, it will actually provide the intervention as well. So when it ranks the interventions from evidence-based all the way down to research-based. And the teacher, it'll give the teacher the selections or the choices, and the teacher will select that intervention, and then it'll give the teacher the professional development for how to actually implement it. So if the teacher doesn't really know how to address phonemic awareness or phonics or summarizing for comprehension, it'll actually walk them through the process of how to provide the intervention over a 4 to 6 week period. Once the teacher puts in the intervention weekly, it will then graph it for them so they can see if the kid's ready to come out of intervention or move through intervention. Not only does it address academics, but it also addresses the social emotional learning part as well. So it's really just a system and structure for helping to get us all aligned with MTSS. And you all can log on to and do a demo account. It's pretty amazing, the program is. Yes?
Move into what RTI is, within that RTI process, we have to have the identification for kids, and that's really good.
So the reason we also wanted to bring it on too is just having some fluidity throughout the district for each tier. So when we start the program, it'll actually do an overall cultural scan for Clark County. So everybody in the district will take the first exam, basically. And they'll look at our tier 1, and they'll tell us if there's any flaws or any gaps in our tier 1 instruction. After it looks at tier 1, then it'll take a look at tier 2, and that's when we'll hit the professional development component with the teachers. According to Branching Minds, there's research that backs them. They've done like a study of over 300,000 kids in how they close gaps among minority groups and make it more culturally responsive and equitable for every kid. So the hope and plan is that we don't have to move through tier 3 and then move on to the special ed route. The idea is to facilitate to where we all can get out of intervention. So that's their biggest, as far as the research that they've done, that's their biggest ploy for moving beyond. Anyone? Do you have any questions? Thank you.
We actually had Dr. Swan, who we asked, would you mind coming?
She's on her way.
She's on the way. Here's what happened. I don't know if you all are aware, there's a massive pileup on I-64. And so it shut 64 down. So we've been in contact with her, and I think she's, how do we say this, directionally challenged. So we've been working with her to try to route her in the best way to get her off at the best one. So she's on her way now, and we'd love for her to be able to kind of talk about what that inquiry design model, because we're trying to do something that by really focusing in on the inquiry parts where it hits the critical thinking skills that no other place is doing. And she'll talk to you a little bit about that. And it's kind of interesting and really cool to hear. We were fortunate to bring her and her husband, who Dr. Jerry Swan, we had brought in with Dr. Ferris. And he has his particular side with the assessment piece that he was working on at that particular time. And so with this, he's now focused a lot on the mathematics side. So what we're ultimately going to team with, and we've talked to our math folks, and a lot of our math folks are very excited because they've been a part and seen some of Kathy Swan's work. And so this is something as moving forward, we're gonna have them working as the humanities versus inhumanities side, if you will, and him working with the math side and so forth, talking about how they can do a similar type approach. How can you do the IDM through the mathematics field? So what we're looking to really do, and this is preschool even, through K, is really hone in and develop that teaching curriculum, at least the core subjects, through the IDM model. And she'll talk to you a little bit about that. Would it be okay if we kind of pause for a minute? I know there's another item on the agenda. I can answer any questions that you have. I was gonna say, and she's on her way. I hate for her to have worked so hard to get here and for it not to, but I understand time constraints that people have too. But would that be something that's feasible?
Good question.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
On case 21, what grade levels? Is it K through?
K-12.
That's
K-12.
that's K-12.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm sorry.
So that's all right. And then with your branching minds, will you discontinue MAP?
No, not for this next year. And this is what we talked about. There's an expense associated with it. But because of the adaptability that MAP offers and really gives us good data, we wanted to be able to use that as well for next year. Now, after that, that's where we're really going to sit there and take a look at branching minds. We're going to look at case 21, and then we're going to look at MAP and say, do we need all three of these things? If
That's
it
a
gives
lot
us
of
the,
assessments.
it is. And that's the one thing we talked about, is that when we looked at the time frames, and we know we can space those out, but we need to have the data for our kids. And so that's where we looked, this is going to be the time to do it. Probably, most likely, we've had that discussion internally. Probably, most likely, we will move away from one of those, but
Yeah,
we
I
want
was
to be able to
gonna
give it a fair shot to see.
All to do
to see
is
it.
test.
Yeah. So,
I'll just take test everything.
but if we take those tests and use the data, that data then informs and drives our instruction.
Yeah. I'm gonna research branching minds. I haven't heard of it.
Yeah. Took us a little while to really, and we really wanted to vet it, so we talked to several districts or a few districts.
Who's using it?
Let's see,
Oh,
we
that's
have,
a good
is it Union that's in Kentucky that's using it? It's Union in Kentucky, isn't it?
Bullet.
It's Bullet, and then we also talked to a group that's in New York, and we talked to them about exactly what it is, and we said, pick it apart for us, you're not reps. I mean,
El Paso.
tell us. So we met with them, we've done some Zoom calls, we said, listen, give us what you like about it and what you don't like about it. Now, the group here in Kentucky, we filmed this, I'm gonna be careful what I say, they really slow rolled it. So when we were listening, we really wanted to get an idea from a couple of the other states where that they really have pushed forward and delved deeper. This is their first year with it, but they really have slow rolled it. So for us, it was more powerful talking to Texas and New York about it, what they have done, what they like about it, and so forth. One drawback. It's not a drawback now, but this is what kept causing us to buckle our legs a little bit was, we don't want to purchase something that then causes you to have to purchase a whole bunch of other things, because then it's the expense that keeps on giving. That's where really the Ames Web comes into play, where that's going to be able to give us a lot of answers, plus some of the things that we have in the district, like Lexia, IXL, some of these things, they'll work within the program. So we already purchased those things, so it's not going to be that additional expense. But before we committed to this or went in this direction, we wanted to make sure we had those questions vetted and answered.
So is branching minds Ames Web?
Yeah, so,
Okay.
no. So Branching Minds is the platform. Ames Web is the intervention tool that would be, progress monitoring, sorry, that would be used with that.
Under that umbrella.
Mm-hmm. So for case, I know like thinking about testing a lot with our kids. So MAP, we give that 3 times a year. Our middle and high, they don't test in MAP. They do, but not everyone. This way, looking at case, it's going to give us some data at the middle and high school level, every department. So then we can actually have conversations with them about their, their alignment pieces, their pacing guides, standards, all of that, what's happening at that high school level. And then we can always use MAP again as that universal
And
student
that's-
at the elementary piece.
It's reading and math, or is it all four contents?
It's all four.
Okay.
Cases, yeah. And case is more like a summative assessment that the teacher can give. So they won't have to go to the computer lab like math. It's nothing like math. It's almost like just an end of the unit assessment that you would take.
But it's
with the-
online, it's a cloud.
It can be, however the teacher wants to do it.
So I'm a little confused on how inquiring-based learning kind of fits into all of this, and why I think you mentioned that, no one around here is using it? Is that correct?
No, there are districts definitely in Kentucky that use that IDM approach.
Okay.
They do. Where we're saying it's going to be kind of revolutionary is a lot of them are taking it from the standpoint of, okay, social studies is going to be assessed with that. Let's get ahead of the curve and really focus our social studies content in with that. What we're looking to do is really hone in on those critical thinking skills with a deeper learning, to where that it's question-based, to where that I refer to teaching as one of two ways. Are you the sage on the stage, or are you the guide on the side? If you're that sage on the stage, sometimes, and that's sometimes needed, it's needed where you're given some instruction. But you can't be the sage on the stage the entire time and expect you really hit those critical thinking skills for kids. This allows you to really present a question, teach kids how to think with that questioning in mind type of thing. And that hits across all areas. And so that's where we wanted to really challenge kids, really get them to think deeper. So it's not about teaching to the test, but when they get to that test, these questions that they see seem so much easier than what that they've had to formulate in their head.
So it's just a way to re-engage or engage with the
Questions,
students. A lot better than what-
questions, questions.
A teaching skill of, instead of just speaking and
Absolutely.
telling them, it's
It's
more
very
of a
much a-
question.
it's very
And
much a
and basically what it sounds like, inquiring.
Yes, absolutely, and there she is.
Yeah.
So she's on time. So she'll be able to go through a little bit with that, but it is that way of retraining kind of the brain. But the great part about it is that we've been able to implement, and Dr. Swan has some stuff that she'll show you, we've been able to do it this year. It's not that we've just been able to work with the teachers, and this is a blank canvas that we have no idea how this is going to work until next year. There's projects that have been put into place and to see what the teachers have come up with and the questions they have formulated for the students, but also what the teachers have done with the students. And that's something Dr. Swan will be able to show as well.
And just one other question, did you say there was RDC and the high school is not on this right now? or-
Oh,
or
no, they are 100%.
Okay.
The GRC, RDC, and Baker are with are doing the inquiry design model 5 through 12. So
Okay.
you have, at the high school, you have a couple of departments, a few sides. You have your English department specifically that's there. We're going to bring some on, and one of the professional developments that they're going to do this summer is actually bring Dr. Swan in, and she can talk a little bit about that, where it's really focused with GRC, and to where they can hit in those different curricular areas.
Okay.
I have one more question for Julie. So, do you like this better than Mastery Connect?
So it's funny that you say that. It goes into Mastery Connect. Can be used with Mastery Connect. So Mastery Connect is that teacher tool that we can see mastering your mastery, and I'm thinking of how what is it? Remediation. Remediation. Whew, sorry. It's the same thing. So that's that real time that teachers will be able to use that tool. We're not, and I've kind of talked with Mr. Holland about it, that Mastery Connect is definitely not something to roll out. It can be separate. There is an item bank, so if teachers really want to dive into it, they can create their own assessments based on the Case 21, based on that data. So once Case develops those benchmarks, that particular question is basically housed in an item bank. They don't use it twice on another assessment. And so that's where teachers can use those things. They can create and use them for instruction or whatever. So Mastery Connect is part of that, but they're kind of separate. Does that make sense?
Anything else? But if not, I'll introduce you to Dr. Kathy Swan. Dr. Ford?
Ah,
I mean, I hate to do this. Do you need to get some water? Do you need to do anything? I mean, I'm
I
afraid
mean,
you
I'll
might be.
bring some up. I need something stronger than water right now. I'm sorry. I
The
was-
margarita machine is broken.
It was 2 hours on Route 64,
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah, I left 2 hours ago, that just managed to hit right when the accident, sort of was there. So you took your mask off, this is the,
Yeah.
okay, I'm unvaccinated. Did you have a PowerPoint? Okay, great. How's everybody doing?
Hi.
Okay. So I thought what I would do is start with sort of what we mean by this term inquiry, and then sort of build out around what we've been doing with your teachers, and then sort of where we are right now in the work, and then where we hope to be going. So, you know, I always like looking at the beach, so there you go. We're gonna pretend that we're all at the beach. What does inquiry look like? So I like to start with the question, what is inquiry? I heard right before, can I have a clicker, or you're gonna click for me? You're my human clicker. Click. Thank you. I always like to start with this question, you know, what is inquiry? I heard right before I came in, somebody was saying, why inquiry? And I think that's a really good prequel question, you know, why do we do inquiry? What I would say, for sake of time, usually I'd ask you all that question, but I would say that, you know, my area of specialty is in social studies education, and a lot of times social studies is taught through answers, not through questions. It's sort of the Bueller, you know, sort of meme, I would say. And I think there's real value in having students wrestle with questions, probably now more than ever, as citizens, for sure. But also because we're preparing them for college and career. And we all know, having gone either to college or definitely having careers, that we're solving problems every day. That's what we do in our careers, is we solve problems. I wish people would give me the answers. And so I think so much of inquiry is allowing students to grapple with real problems that helps them become better at college, career, and hopefully as citizens. So more on that as we move through, but we can start with this question, what is inquiry? And I thought we could play a little game because it's 7:30 on a Monday. My clicker's gonna help me play this game. It's called, now click, good. We're gonna play this game called Is This Inquiry? So I'm gonna give everybody a scenario, our board a scenario, and then I'm gonna ask the question, is this inquiry? And I want you to answer yes, no, or maybe, right? So, first scenario. Students brainstorm possible solutions to a problem like gun violence, mask wearing, vaccination, and work together to help solve the problem. Is this inquiry?
Yes.
They're not very good at this game, our county, so, all right, let's do another one. The teacher asks students questions as they work together to analyze a historic photograph. Is this inquiry?
Maybe.
Maybe. Anybody have a different answer?
I would say yes.
No,
Someone says yes. Anybody else?
Yes.
Yes. We're all over the place. All right, that's okay. Good answer. Based on a walking tour of the block or surrounding area, students make a map of the area around the school. Is this inquiry?
No.
No.
People hate some maps right now. I've lived and died by my map quest here on my way here. All right, next question. Students work together to develop a list of questions that will help them learn more about how to run a political campaign. Is this inquiry?
Yes.
Yes.
Anybody else? Ish, okay, keep going. Students explain how the Electoral College works to their parents. Is this inquiry?
Yes.
It's hard,
I would
isn't
say
it?
maybe.
That's amazing.
Maybe.
Maybe, all right. Keep going. Students create a PSA on the environmental challenges faced by Americans today. Is this inquiry?
Yes.
She was pretty definite on that one.
I love it. All right, let's keep going. Students debate, has 2020 really ended? That's my joke for the night. All right, let's keep going. So what's my point? Inquiry is this idea that's been around in education for a long time, definitely for the last 100 years, and it's sort of this blurry idea. When I walk in with your teachers, I ask them the same thing. What is inquiry? And you get 100 different definitions of what that looks like. You get things like questioning, investigating, but what does that mean when you're in a science classroom, or when you're in a math classroom, or when you're in a social studies classroom? All of a sudden, things get blurry. Click. So our job has been to make this thing called inquiry a lot clearer to the teachers so that students can participate in inquiry in their classrooms. So what we know about inquiry is that students are going to need lots and lots of guidance and support. There's a lot of misunderstanding about inquiry, that kids are just finding their own way. They ask questions and they go off on their own, trying to find answers to them. And that's not how it works. At the University of Kentucky, I have about 25 doctoral students, and every single one of them needs my guidance and support to ask a good question, to find out what we already know about that question, to set up a study, to collect data, then to write up a dissertation, and then defend it in front of the committee. And so if graduate students need that kind of help, we are sure going to need to help 13, 14, 15, 6-year-olds do this thing called inquiry. So we call that scaffolding. That's nothing new, where we come alongside and help students do this thing called inquiry. So what I've been working on, I heard Mr. Holland talk about this. My work has been around this thing called the inquiry design model, which is a curricular approach to helping teachers do inquiry with the content that's in their scope and sequence, but scaffolding that process for students. So IDM rests on 3 things. So I don't even use the inquiry word at UK because I use it so often. I ask, what are the questions that you're using to drive your instruction? What are the sources that you're putting in front of students to investigate those questions? And then what are you asking students to do to demonstrate their understanding of the question and the sources? So questions, tasks, sources are sort of the mantra that I've been working with your teachers. We represent those 3 things, go ahead, questions, tasks, and sources on a thing we call a blueprint, which is essentially a 1-page curricular representation of the questions, the tasks, and the sources that a teacher might use to set up an inquiry. And so your teachers have been working through a blueprint with me, developing a blueprint and then teaching that blueprint in their classroom. So I will say that we didn't discover fire. I like to say that a lot. I love this picture. It feels like how I felt about 15 minutes ago. But we did not discover fire. Inquiry's been around for a long time. Here's my bona fide. I'm an ed professor. You have to quote Dewey. It's part of our Constitution. I've got it like tattooed on my back, but you won't know this. But back in 1916, even Dewey was saying, like, students need to wrestle with a problem and find their way out of that problem. That's when we know real learning takes place. Go ahead. So a lot of times I hear, well, you're just reinventing the wheel. This sounds like things that we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And to that I say, yeah, because it's good. It's like the wheel, right? Like when we all drove, I was looking in the parking lot, and everybody has a brand new BMW here in Clark County, so that's good. And so you didn't drive on wagon wheels, right? You drove with high performance tires, because reinventing the wheel is worth spending time on. So I like to say you become more precise, intentional, effective in your instruction when you spend time on things that matter, so that in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years from now, when we're gone from the classroom, they're going to still be talking about inquiry because it's the right way to teach. We're just getting better at it. We're getting more precise. We're getting more knowledgeable. So your teachers have been, I wrote a few books. That's what we do as professors. We write books, and I wrote a book about how to build these inquiries, which is just good old-fashioned instructional design. And so your teachers have been framing an inquiry, thinking about questions, doing good backward design, trying to think about how you build up students' capacity through the formative work, and then ultimately finishing the inquiry with ways that students can communicate their understanding in really powerful ways and civically engage with the content of the inquiry. So that's taken a lot of time to do this year. Okay. And then every time I come in and work with your teachers, we issue a challenge. They have to do something. It can't just be, a one-day show. They have to actually do something in between when we teach. So one of the challenges was to, I'm JFK fan. We do profiles and inquiry instead of profiles and courage. But we asked them to teach an inquiry or teach part of an inquiry. And as you can imagine, COVID was a huge challenge for that. I will say that your teachers were unbelievably committed and full of grit. They did it no matter what. They did it no matter Zoom. They did it no matter if they had a horrible week. And so they were able to report out on sort of the good and the bad of what happened and what they would do to make these inquiries better. So there's Brittany Epperson, who's a 5th grade teacher who talks about teaching about Columbus over Zoom, and it's just as great. And then the next person is Jason Ashburn, who I'm in love with. I just love him as a teacher. But last time we were together, he talked about doing an inquiry where he was studying and where he had the students studying Andrew Jackson and asked, should Andrew Jackson be on our money? And students were completely engaged, so we were all reflecting on that, and there was a science teacher right in front who said, you know why that inquiry worked? Because my daughter's in your class, and she came home, and she's never talked about social studies, and all of a sudden, you lit a fire in her. She was just all sorts of activity at dinner. It was so cool. You guys were there for that moment. It was just like, what? So Jason Ashburn is one of your leaders for sure in this work. Okay, so most of the time when we get through that process, go ahead, teachers go, aha, inquiry, I get it, it's not Narnia. We can do this thing. We can teach content, but we can also teach skills through this inquiry process. But then soon, teachers have lots of questions. So go ahead and click on all 4. How many times do I need to do this in a year? Do we go beyond just one experience to many experiences? When do students get to develop their own questions? How can inquiry change over the course of a year? Am I allowed to mess with this blueprint? So where we are right now, particularly since January, is really tackling those questions. Go ahead. So we've been thinking about not just an inquiry experience, but inquiry experiences across the curriculum. So that's not just once a year, but there's this constant drumbeat. So we've been using this diagram, and curriculum spelled wrong, I apologize. I just noticed that the other day. So you're welcome. I admitted it. But anyway, we've been talking about questions, tasks, and sources as a foundation for their house. We've been talking about different types of inquiry, and that ultimately when teachers think about these experiences, they put a roof on their house. Go ahead. So they build a curriculum. So we've been talking about looping, go ahead, where you loop inquiries, keep going. So for instance, we've been working with this idea of framing a civics class where teachers might do 4 inquiries where they talk about the concept of power. How powerful should the president be? How powerful should the Congress be? How powerful should the courts be? And then how powerful should the people be? And using that as a way to sort of tie their content together in a meaningful way. Another one, the 6th grade team is working on a loop around this notion of progress. What was agriculture good for humans? Did Xi Huangdi improve China? How did democracy change the world, etc.? So really cool kinds of questions that are driving their curriculum, not just once a year, but over the course of a year. Go ahead. So when teachers start doing this in meaningful ways, and this is happening in Clark County, we start to not just see a horizontal loop, but these vertical loops across grade levels. And then once you start looping, there's a good, the dude abides quote, it's the rug that ties the room together, right? You start to have systematic curriculum, systematic assessment, systematic teacher ed, and teacher evaluation, and that's where we are right now. It's the most exciting part of our time together because next time we're going heart of darkness into assessment. We're talking about what does meaningful assessment look like, and they're at the point where they can have that question, that conversation, that they're all doing questions, tasks, and sources. So now we can talk about more meaningful ways to report out what students are doing. And then teacher evaluation, and so that's coming up as well, giving them instrumentation to be able to do peer evaluation, allow administrators to give them feedback on these inquiry experiences. Go ahead. And so the other thing, last few things that I'll say, inquiry is coming to the humanities. So I've been working primarily with the English and social studies teachers, with a smattering of science teachers. My husband, who is a STEM person, I call it the inhumanities just to get on his nerves. But anyway, he's going to be coming and working with your math science folks to do the same kind of work so that it's a language that's spoken across the curriculum. Ahead. And then we also worked with administrators as well. Mr. Holland had the foresight to bring us in to work with the principals and the superintendent. It was a cool day where we built Legos, talked about inquiry, put them through the paces with the inquiry design model, and just had an overall great day. And this was really reinforcing to the teachers who I met with a couple weeks ago, said the administrators are bought in. This isn't squirrel reform, squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. This is, we are in this with you. This is worth investing in. So this was all good. All right. And then lastly, you know, my latest project is this project called Making Inquiry Possible, where I've done a series of films around building inquiry cultures. And that's what we're really thinking about here in Clark County. What is this unique inquiry culture that we're building? And so anyway, that's worth taking a look at. We've been spending a lot of time thinking about that. Okay, so where are we headed? A couple of points, and then I'll stop talking. One is that we've talked about expanding the language of inquiry really to the STEM folks as well as to the elementary. And then the other thing we've been recently talking about is building up a leadership team, a teacher leadership team, which I think is really essential. Ones that are kind of your early adopters, your most enthusiastic teachers, and there are a bunch of them here to help sustain the work here in Clark County, and to be sort of boots on the ground, the people that are really using and operationalizing the language of their peers. The other thing is just building off success. And then we've talked about doing some filming of the teachers in action. So I think that's it. Boom, there we go. I did it. 15, 20 minutes or so. I did it. All right. Did you want me to answer questions?
Sure,
That's
absolutely.
okay. Yeah, so any questions?
How is this different than like Literacy Design Collaborative, like LDC?
Well,
Is that somewhat of an inquiry model? I mean,
well, what I would say is that the LDC, the focus is really on building up students' literacy capacities, which I'm wholeheartedly for, and we've been talking about literacy in terms of reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and learning academic vocabulary. I would say the LDC is less about inquiry and more about these literacy practices, so that when you take apart an LDC, you don't necessarily have a really compelling question that sort of ties to, that uses good backward design. I mean, I think maybe it's intended to do that, but practically speaking, most social studies teachers, for instance, look at those and say, but that's not really how we do literacy in the context of social studies. It sort of puts the literacy before the content. So that's how I would describe that. Makes sense? And the other thing that I would say is that LDC is very, very prescriptive. Whereas the blueprint, I would say, is much more, my expectation is that a blueprint looks different from Jason's classroom to Grace's classroom in the middle school, because they're stylistically different. So we're not so prescriptive on sort of the lesson plan part of it, whereas LDC tends to be pretty molecular when it comes to that. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions?
So what's the biggest challenge the district has as they adopt this? There's a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm, but you know, how do you keep the ball rolling, so to speak, and keep it progressing and building that leadership team here in the district? Because obviously you can't be here, you know, constantly. You know, so
Yeah.
so what's the challenge of that? I mean, what can we do, or what can be done to keep that enthusiasm going?
Well, that is probably the most, it's a great question. One is, inquiry is the hardest thing your teachers are gonna do. COVID or not COVID, it's just hard. It's hard to teach really well, to really give up your control, to spend a lot of time planning for instruction, to listen more than talk, because when you listen, you have to see gaps in learning, right? And that's hard to see as a teacher. It's much easier to talk over that and pretend it's not existing. And so for teachers, it's a vulnerable act to do inquiry and to learn, because it's putting a mirror up to their practice, a mirror of their beliefs about what their students are capable of too. And so I think what I'm writing a new book, and my favorite line so far is that I think teachers' superpower is conversation, and inquiry teachers' superpower is conversation. So how do we enable their conversations to reinforce one another and to provide the kind of support that you need when you try something and you just need to talk through it with another person, and to have them say, wow, that was great. I can't believe that you did that. That is fantastic. In the same way Jason stood up in that meeting and told that story. So I think that what you all can do is reinforce that risk is good, that the work they're doing is worth spending time on, and that you really amplify the success stories, particularly from people that were resistant. You know, I think that's, to me, that's what I try to do when I work with your teachers, is give them some skills, but also give them space to talk about, you know, how they're doing with it.
Dr. Swan, can I add?
Yeah.
So when we actually started this, we're almost a school year in. So it's been consistently with the teachers. And I've been there the whole road with her. And when we started, we were at like 20-some teachers. We have so many people waiting in line. Like, she had people contacting her outside of just asking questions, saying, can we get on board? Can we pilot with you? So now we have like a waiting list. So I feel like the enthusiasm for it is just expounding like infinitely. So just the excitement that I've gotten to see being a part of it, I'm really excited for Clark County and what she's doing with us, and the teacher leadership, the teachers that are really, you know, leading the way.
We actually had, we had a weather situation that happened, unfortunately. Normally when you have a speaker who's not able to come, that's, you know, you want to say publicly, oh, that's a shame, and privately you're going, yes, you know, it's like, no day. I actually had people who were texting me going, please tell me that you're not thinking of having to postpone or reschedule with her, because we want her here. I mean, that were constant texts with that. It might have been somebody's husband in this room that was a part of that. But I mean, there were several people who were, and that's kind of the feeling. They look forward to when she's there. And like Tammy said, we've got a waiting list, and people are saying, we hear what you're doing with social studies or with English. When can math get on board with that? Or when can we be a part of that? And that's kind of where you want to be.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that anytime, if you think about exercise, for instance, you know, you have those moments where you're like, wow, I'm doing great, and then you hit a wall, and you need somebody to tell you, keep going, you know, keep running, or I don't run, but, you know, keep going to your class, you know, your yoga class, keep doing it, because you just hit walls. So you go in sort of fits and starts. We've got a lot of momentum right now, but your teachers will have moments where they dip, and they'll just need you to tell them, keep going. You're doing a great job.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anybody else?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
well,
much.
thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So with that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Christie. If you have any questions, let us know. We'll get you the 3-year plan. If you think of anything else, let us know. We'll be happy to write it for you.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not staying for that. I did get the state one. I wanted to talk with you just briefly, just give you a quick, I know you're familiar with Senate Bill 128 that's passed, the supplemental school year, or at some point the do-over year. We had a webinar today, our entire cabinet staff met in here today, and we watched. Still a lot of questions. I think Brenda maybe sent out, I know I got one about the same time she did, she sent me one, I think I know it's when you sent this the KDE guidelines on this to all the other board members, you all probably have it, so I didn't run off another copy. You can see in there what the guidelines are. I think this is a well-intended bill that came about at the last minute, and with not being completely thought through with all the possibilities. What I'm passing around to you, you know the timeline. If you looked at that, you know the timeline. Parents have until May the 1st to sign up for this. You all have until June the 1st as a board to decide if you're going to offer this program and offer this opportunity for students in Clark County. That's K through 12. And when you make that decision, it's for all kids, from kindergarten through 12. If you can't just say we're going to do this at an elementary or a middle or a high school level. It's every one or no one. So what you have there, I started immediately as soon as this passed, starting to try to get with some other superintendents and trying to see what some others were looking at as far as what kind of information are they going to put out about this. And that's gone from not going to put anything out. You know, we're going to let them, you know, it's been in the papers, let them, if they make application, we'll deal with it. I think we need to get a little further ahead of the curve than that. We've already got a lot of parents talking about it. I found it very interesting today, and maybe a little bit concerning, that when they had KSBA, had all the Wayne Youngs and all the other folks from KSBA, and yet when they introduced this bill today, the first person to speak on it was Julian Tackett. That was the first person to speak on it. That, to me, I've said all along, I think it has the makings of a do-over year athletically. I know that has created and garnered some interest from some students in Clark County. The ones I'm hearing from so far, I've not heard from anybody asking questions about it other than athletic questions. Now, I'm not saying that that's not the case, that that's not going to be. But what I've sent here, this was a copy of one that several of us have worked. It originated in Lawrence County, I think is where this one originated. We looked at it as a regional group of superintendents. I think there's some good information in here that we'd be glad to talk to you about or try and answer any questions as we know now. I can tell you, and I don't know, you might ask some of the other cabinet members, I don't think there was a lot of information anybody gleaned from this program today that we didn't already either know or have questions about. Now, we were told that tomorrow during our superintendent's webcast with the commissioner that we're going to gain some more insight on some of this. So I'll be tuned into that one tomorrow at 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock to see what comes from it there. I think this is something that we need to get out pretty quickly. If you look through this, you will see it talks, there's blocks that you can check depending upon your grade level and what your choices would be. There's some crazy things about it. If a senior, we've already have gotten the answer, if someone did an early graduation this past December, they cannot participate because they've already received a diploma. So they can't do this. Is just for students that will be receiving the diploma in May, and from there. So it's just students that are currently in classes right now, whether that be virtually or in person. If you look on this form, one of the things that we kind of agreed on as superintendents that this probably needs to be an in-person year next year. This would need to be an in-person year. They can only take coursework that they did the preceding year. In other words, they can't come back in and take a different curriculum unless that curriculum included a dual credit class, which they failed. If they failed a dual credit class, maybe because of COVID, then they would be permitted to go back and take that dual credit class, take it over. Otherwise, if students have used up their dual credit scholarships in their junior and senior years, they choose a dual credit class as they come back and that would be on parents to pay for that according to these documents like this. They would have to be enrolled also as a dual credit student, or as a dual enrollment student. In other words, they'd be enrolled in the college. And they're taking those college credit classes through the college, because the high school would have no part, nothing to do with it. It can't count as another credit for high school. Seniors, no, and I think we gotta get some clarification on this. We got a little bit of different understandings on what was presented today. My original understanding was that seniors could not take a class over and gain a new grade for it. If they got a B in it last year, or a D in it last year, even if they come back and do a do-over year, the grade's gonna remain the same. It will be reflected on their transcript that they audited the class and they took it for their own betterment, but it will not change their GPA. For graduating seniors, anyone who holds a diploma in hand and comes back for next year for the do-over year, they cannot take any classes to increase their GPA. I think that's where probably where Keys money and all that stuff kind of played in that. They could probably see that was gonna be a fiasco trying to figure out how you're gonna go back now on kids and raise their Keys money and stuff. So for seniors, they cannot retake a class to increase their credit, or increase the number of credits that they got, or increase the grade, unless it was a failed dual credit class. If they do a dual credit class over that was a failure, then they can change that grade. That's the only way the grade. Now, my understanding was that below the seniors, there was to be no GPA changes anywhere. Now, I don't know, there's some question now. They kind of led us into that a little bit, and they were a little wishy-washy on that today, so that's a question I'll try to get answered tomorrow during the superintendent webinar with the commissioner. Is that something?
So I don't understand why a student or parent would want their child to repeat unless they could, you know, if they had a bad year, which was all understandable, that it could be, you know, they might have a bad
And
year.
I don't know what.
But if that grade's gonna stay put, if it's not
It's
gonna
definitely
change.
The same for seniors. It will not, we cannot. It is very specific. If you look at this KDE guidance, it says in there that you cannot change the GPA of a senior. And I have to go back and look. I've read.
Is it just for seniors or everyone, like a sophomore,
I
say
can't
sophomore?
remember if in there it said for everyone. Do you remember, did it say everybody? I know it said seniors, but that's a question that we've got coming up tomorrow. Can underclassmen increase their scores? My first thinking was yes, they could, but then something I heard or read in here led me to believe that they couldn't, so we'll get clarification on that.
And also, I think you mentioned that they can't take any other classes than what they already took last year?
That's
So they
why-
have to take the same schedule,
So what,
but the grades don't count?
Yep.
well, you said the
What I
grades
get
do
from the
count,
guys here,
they won't change.
Won't
And if
change.
any of you guys was in cabinet, if anybody else got it different, because I was in and out trying to take some phone calls during this, but
Wayne made a point of saying, Wayne Young, the CASA attorney, he made a point of saying, I think it would be irresponsible basically for any school to have a student come back and do this and then not hold them accountable, because then it's a free-for-all, especially if they're coming back from an athletic standpoint. So his response to it was, you're gonna have to hold them accountable in some facet. Now, where we heard two different things, and we're gonna put into the superintendent's sandbox, is we heard one thing about, no, you couldn't, it wasn't gonna change the grades for underclassmen, but Wayne said something that caused some of us in here to think, wait a minute, is he countering what that was said there? So it caused us to go, that's that question we're gonna have to get defined tomorrow.
Yeah, because, and I agree, you have to hold them accountable.
Well,
And if if a student wants to repeat to better themselves, it doesn't sound like what you just said, it's gonna better themselves. Even if they did better, it's not gonna be reflected in their transcripts. Or am I missing something?
No.
That's our original thing.
That was our thought too, and we'll try to get clarification on that tomorrow.
And as far as the senior goes, did you say the senior could actually hold the diploma and come back?
Yep. I've had this conversation with some of you all. We have had concerns in past when we have students that graduate early, even coming back for a graduation to walk the stage or to do a prom or anything like that, when they've already gotten the diploma just a few months before. Now we're talking a year ago. I mean, they're gonna have a diploma in May, and then they're gonna be coming back next May for a graduation.
Well,
I've got some concerns there now. I have concerns if someone, and I'm not gonna pick on any sport, but this one just kind of plays out on the timeline. Let's take a football player.
That's what I was gonna,
If a football player comes back, that's the first part of the year. So as soon as they come back, they're gonna be engaged in their classes. They're probably gonna be attending to keep the grades up, to keep the attendance part so that they can participate in the athletic. What happens when football season's over and now you have them for the rest of the year? That can affect your ADA. If they don't show up, that counts against you in attendance. That can drop your attendance. I also understand that any student that stays an additional year, it's going to affect your GP or your graduation rate, because they have to graduate in a 12-year time frame. And if they do this do-over year, this supplemental year, that now puts them an extra year, which means they did not meet the graduation rate. So that's going to have some effect on graduation rate. We worked hard here for years to get a graduation rate where it is. And I've said all along, you know, you take Phoenix Academy and something like that, they are the ones that helps us do that. But when you make an opportunity here to where, and it might not just be football, you know, it could be anything. It could just be come back, not even for sports, but then come back in and they just kind of pick and choose when they're going to come and when they're not going to. And in this, it does say that one of the pieces that was put in this one was that after 6, they were allowed 6 tardies or absences unexcused. If they hit the 7th one, they're removed. Now, I got to clarify that. What authority do we have to remove? We just kick somebody out of school for 7 absences, because the truancy people aren't going to do it. We'd be another year getting them in truancy.
Well,
And that's not going to happen because they're already graduates.
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say, what holds them accountable to time, they don't care if they get kicked out, they have a diploma in their hand.
Your testing also, your assessment at the end of the year. If they, in a grade that is assessment year, they have to do the assessment again the following year. If they choose to do poorly on it, they don't try, or they just flat say, I'm not going to do it, then that can be entered as a 0, and that can dramatically affect your assessment scores. So that's a big concern for me. So there's some major questions, in my opinion, that still has to be answered before I'm comfortable saying to you all, and this is something that you all are going to need to decide and make a decision if you want to do this program. And if you choose to do that, you have to have a plan by KDE, you have to make the decision by June the 1st that you're going to do it or not. And by June the 16th, there has to be a plan in front of KDE of how you're going to do that. Now, we are going to help write that, at whatever your all's direction. But I'm going to need, and this may be some of those things that we may need to take one afternoon or one evening for an hour or two and just sit down after we gain a little more information. And let's talk about what would your expectations be? Could it be met with an application form like this? You notice one of the questions they put on there, students age on August 1st of their requested senior year. That means if this kid is a 7th grader and they're going to graduate in 5 years, we're asking them to put their age on there, what they're going to be when they graduate in 5 years, because that's I think a large part of why a lot of people is going to do it is going to be for the extra year in athletics. The rule for athletics remains, if you turn 19 by August the 1st, you cannot participate athletically in a supplemental school year. So that's something that if a lot of people are thinking that, and some of your people maybe at your early grades, your 6th, 7th, 8th grade, they may be thinking about this as another year for my child to grow, mature, get stronger, all those kinds of things, maybe toward that. Need to make sure that they're thinking up front and that they're checking off what that age is so that they consciously have to put that down there. And we can look at that and say to them as we meet with them. And I think if we do this, principals and or principals and the counselors at each building is going to have to meet with the parents in person when they bring this in and say, here's the way it works.
Is that a district policy or state policy? The age?
That's state.
State.
That's KSHA. KSHA says we're not going to vary from KSHA rules at all. And they're in this, if a child should transfer, they can't come back and say, we went to Clark County this year, but we're going to transfer to Fayette or Montgomery or Bourbon or Madison. They could not participate athletically if they transfer somewhere else. And I don't even know what the ramifications would be of them transferring to another school district. I think what I read in my conversations at the regional meeting at first was they can't transfer. If they can't do their supplemental school year at the school where they did it last year, then they would not do a supplemental, because I don't think a lot of the other schools are probably going to take the students coming from another district for that do-over. Now, if they come in with the right attitude, come in with the right things, everything's going, it could increase your ADA. I mean, it could have the potential to raise your ADA. I just find that's going to be very difficult when you've got a senior, how you're going to keep a senior motivated to be in school every day, go through the motions of things that they have to do when they already have a diploma in hand before they even walk back in the building. that's of a concern. And that's the questions I want to get answered, and we'll see what we find out tomorrow. And I just need to do, I'll go through Arlene, we'll send something out, see when's a good time. I don't care to meet with everybody individually and go through this, but we need to talk about, we need to know what your direction for us is gonna be. Do you want, I want you to look at these and see if there are some of these bulleted items in here that you can live with, if there's some that you can't live. If you want to do this at all or not, it's totally up to you. You can wait and see how many applications you have at the end of May, or at the 1st of May, and see what their intentions for the, and reasoning for the do-over is, and make a decision. From there, you have, this will be on the agenda on the May meeting. You make a decision on whether we're going to participate in this or not.
Did the Senate bill provide any provision where districts have a right to modify language to meet?
I think there's some intent for you to be able to do it to a certain extent, because that's why they're saying you have to submit a plan. They're going to approve that plan. You submit a plan, they may say, well, you can't do that. That, I don't know. We've not heard. And I will tell you, as a regional superintendents, there were 8 of us, and we had 25 questions. In an hour's time, we come up with 25 questions that none of us could answer, and we submitted. I'm hopeful that tomorrow, I hope to hear some of those today, but we didn't. I'm hopeful that tomorrow in the superintendent's webcast, when these are questions that come from regional superintendents, someone's going to get addressed. But I'll know tomorrow. I'll probably know by 5 o'clock tomorrow.
I mean, I think the intent was good, but
I
there's a lot.
agree.
If there's some modifications, or if the bill allows some modifications for local boards, you know, I think that would help a lot, but
I feel like that
hopefully we'll get, so when is the meeting? You all have a meeting tomorrow?
tomorrow at 2 o'clock for superintendent.
Is there any more updates than is that once a week meeting, or is it?
And what we saw today, and I don't think there was any revelations. I have to look at these guys, because I was in and out, I was on the phone with some other people, so I was in and out, and I didn't hear every minute of it. But these guys were, all
Couple of things.
7 of these that were in here, 8 of these were in here the whole time.
Like one thing that one principal had asked, with students in ungraded primary, will they still, do parents still have that capability of holding them back? So we were able to get that question. The answer is yes. With this being that, supplemental school year type of thing, where that they have that, they still have that at their discretion. So a couple of points we heard, but for the most part, it was what we did.
Anything else, Mr. Christie?
There's some of these schools, and I will tell you that some of the smaller school districts that I've talked with are really concerned about this, because if that graduate, and we're not anywhere near this, but some of them are at that graduation rate that could drop below that 80%, and that puts them at a CSI school, and there's some ramifications that comes with that, and they're concerned about that, becoming a CSI school. And we're not there, and I can't imagine that we would have that many that would choose to take part in this, that it could put us, that could worry about 98 something at graduation.
Any questions? Any other comments? Mr. Christie? You good?
I'm good with it. I'd just like some, maybe after I have this tomorrow, try to send out a group email and see what your all's thoughts are as far as the time, how you want to get together, how you want to talk about it, or if you wanted to send me individual comments. Let's try to put those in some form of an application process, but I think this needs to happen pretty quick.
Well, if we can, hopefully if you get the answers, we can have a discussion, and at least have it on the agenda for a discussion next week at our regular meeting. I would say that's for sure.
Okay, I can add it to the agenda for this next week. If it's
Don't know if you have all the answers by next week, but at least
not gonna make
hopefully
a
have some.
promise, and I will ask the questions again.
With that, I need a motion to go into closed session.
I make a motion.
Wisconsin 9, need a motion.
I'll second it.
Ms. Hendricks, second. All in favor? Aye. Hey, Ashley.
Hi,
Hey.
I
All
forgot
right.
about that.
We're-
sound so loud. I'm going to eat now.
Okay. We're in closed
You all
session.
have a wonderful night.
Yeah.
Too.